Good afternoon. I am so happy and proud to be standing here as your new Honolulu prosecutor. The mandate that I got from the voters was to clean house and restore trust to the prosecutor's office. I think we're going to do that in a number of ways. I'll be talking about that in a minute. But part of that was bringing in some new folks, as well as using the talent that's already in the office. And together, working together, we're going to make this work. So I would like to, at this point, introduce first the members of the administrative team who are going to help us do this. First is First Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Tom Brady. Tom worked here at the office for 7 years. He was then at the United States Attorney's Office. He had a variety of positions there, supervisory, handled some of the biggest cases there. One of the last well-known ones was the Pali Golf Course shooting, an organized crime RICO case that involved different factions fighting for control of gambling interests. We're happy to have him back here as First Deputy. Next is Paul Mao. He's the Chief of Staff. He started in this office actually in a computer support role. And then he went to law school, became a deputy prosecutor, was here for a number of years. He was over on the Big Island, head of the District and Family Court Division there under Mitch Roth, and came back here and was at the Attorney General's office. He will be the Chief of Staff. We are trying to think outside the box because you keep doing things the same way, you're going to get the same results. So we're tapping into talent that may not have been in a prosecutor's office before, but are talented, effective people. Cheryl Noy was a mainstay in Honolulu probation for a number of years. She started virtually every innovative program that was there. She created the first sex offender unit. She came up with a pilot for domestic violence cases. She was my partner when we started the whole Hope Probation initiative that is now in 32 states and one territory, Guam being the latest. So she's going to bring her expertise here to help us look at some issues in a new way, deal with some community things, be a supervisor, help with the hiring. And last but certainly not least is Matt Devanch. He is going to handle communications among many other activities within the office. He's the senior counsel and special counsel. And his background, he was at a very good firm, Paul Johnson, for several years. And then he's been at the State Attorney General's office for the last 10 years, most recently supervising a team of 30 Deputy Attorney Generals and staff dealing with COVID-related issues. So I'm really happy that we have this team to join me in getting the office back on track and really making the office the best it can be. So thank you all, and I'll excuse you at this point. All right, now the backbone of an office are the supervisors. And I think in somewhat of a departure from the past, I have really tried to consult with them to make decisions. Some people had left the office, some were not reappointed. We had a lot of movements to make. And I talked to the division chiefs because they're the ones who know the office the best. They're well respected, they have a lot of years in the business. And they've all got jury trial experience, but in particular, for the folks that are supervising the 4 trials division, I wanted to make sure they had a lot of trial experience for 2 reasons. One, during the middle of a jury trial, when something comes at a deputy prosecutor from a weird angle, they have to be able to figure out how to deal with it, as well as preparing for the case. And so they should be able to go talk to their division chief about how to handle something, they should talk to their team captains the same way. And this group has that kind of experience in spades. I'm really happy to introduce the new division chief for misdemeanors, and that's Florence Nakakuni. Flo followed me as U.S. Attorney, 2 U.S. attorneys after me. She was the U.S. Attorney under President Obama. She'd been with the Justice Department for a total of 32 years. She had many different supervisory roles in that office. And then for the last 8 was as the United States Attorney. I think her most well-known recent case was the prosecution of United Public Workers Chief Gary Rodriguez. She went up against a very well-known, celebrated attorney from San Francisco, and she was successful on all counts. And Mr. Rodriguez ended up serving between 5 and 6 years in federal prison. Next is Chris Van Marter. He is head of the Special Prosecution Division. That's made up of career criminal, elder abuse, and sex assault. Chris has been with the department for 28 years. He's done 108 jury trials. He was one of the real mainstays who could handle any kind of case for years. And I'm really happy he's one of our division chiefs who are going to be able to provide leadership, but also encouragement, suggestions, and being able to work with the deputy prosecutors. We have Lauren Thomas from the appellate division. She's been with the office for 31 years, but she's been head of the appellate division since 1994. She's done a number of jury trials. She's smart. She can work with the different divisions in helping the deputy prosecutors to be up to speed on the cases and make sure they're knowledgeable about what the current case law is to do that. Next is Scott Bell. He's head of the large trials division. Scott has been with the department for many years. He's done over 100 jury trials. Just like Chris Van Marter, he's been awarded a number of awards as being top prosecutor. And that's the kind of people I want leading the largest trials divisions, because the deputies need to know they can go talk to them for advice. They can ask them questions before the trial, how to avoid problems, how to deal with it. And they'll be working very closely with the deputies to make sure that happens. Tiffany Caeo is head of the family division. A lot of difficult cases when you're dealing with domestic violence, whether it's felonies or misdemeanors, juvenile offenders. It's an important division because those are very tough cases to take to trial. It's a challenging area. It's dangerous. My first 2 years on the bench, I was assigned to the domestic violence misdemeanor jury trial section. And as I would tell the jurors after each case, a lot of these go to trial, and they take the toughest cases to trial because most of these cases will not end in murders and not end in homicides. But when you look at a domestic violence homicide, they almost all have one of these misdemeanor cases in their background. So they're all very important. And Mark Ewan is head of the screening and intake division. He's been with the department for 24 years. He has served as chief of the screening and intake division for more than 9 years. He liaisons with HPD. He helps us decide, do we have enough evidence? And as I've said many times, you don't charge somebody unless you are convinced they committed the crime beyond a reasonable doubt and that you have admissible evidence to prove that. So often the deputies end up getting sent to screening before they go to one of the vertical teams that are in special prosecution as well as in family. So I'm really happy with the team we have here. I have relied on them. I have asked their opinions on deputy movements, who'd be good in which job, because coming into the office after an absence, I know some of the deputies, I don't know a lot of them. So I really relied on the division chiefs in order to give me good advice about movement and which deputies should be in which positions. So I want to thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you. right now I'd like to talk to you about the 100-day plan, which really are what we're focusing on to start with. And the crux of this is what this campaign, what the election was all about, and that is restoring trust to this office. And through all the problems that have had, there have been problems with trust, whether it's with the police department, the general public. And we're trying to, as you can see, put together a really good team, but also do a number of things on many levels to help restore trust. So, and when I talk about that, restoring trust, it's number one, but it applies to everything we're doing, to all 10 points to begin with, because they will all go toward making the office run better, making sure it's run honestly, and it all kind of covers it. But the first section is restoring trust. And there's a case that you're going to get a copy of that called Berger versus United States. And this is a Supreme Court case where Justice Sutherland talked about the role of the United States Attorney. But it's a federal case, so he talks about U.S. Attorney, but it applies to any prosecutor in this country. And what Berger talks about is the prosecutor's role is doing justice. It isn't winning cases. It's talking about being fair. You should strike hard blows, but not foul ones. And Berger has a special place in my heart because I was head of the District and Family Court Division for 4 years when I worked in this office before. I would hand out a copy of Berger to every deputy I supervised, all the law clerks over the years, and I'd say these aren't just words. These are our words to live by, because prosecutors are in a unique role. Defense attorneys, whether they're public defenders or they pick and choose clients as private counsel, are there to help their client. That is their job. They're not there to do justice. They're not there to improve the system. Their job is to help their client. And if I was charged with a crime, I'd like somebody just interested in helping me. But the prosecutors are there to make sure the system is fair, that people are charged correctly, and that justice is done. If somebody is not guilty of the offense, they shouldn't be charged, and if prosecutors discover it, they should drop the case. Discover that they're not guilty or they have questions about it, they should drop the case as they move along. So Berger has been handed out to most of the deputies already. We've discussed it with them. I'm meeting with all the divisions, with lawyers and staff. I'm doing it separately because of COVID restrictions. But Berger is critical. We are, and as part of those meetings, I'm laying out what my expectations are. Everybody should be treated with courtesy and respect, whether it's other attorneys, whether it is a custodian, whether it's a deputy sheriff. That's the way I was raised. It's that kind of professionalism I am expecting from all the deputy prosecutors. And I have every confidence that all my supervisors and all the folks in the admin team treat people that way, because we have to be good role models too. As part of those meetings, I'm saying very clearly, you're hearing it from the top, I have zero tolerance for any sort of discrimination, any sort of bullying, any sort of sex harassment or hostile work environment. You know, in my jobs in the past, I have reported people for that. I have turned people in for that. Working here is hard enough without staff or deputies having to deal with those kinds of things. We're going to do implicit bias training, so we're going to come up with a plan to make sure that all prosecuting office employees do that, take that training. I did that as a judge. We all have these preconceptions, implicit biases, and in this job in particular, we got to make sure that we are as fair as can be, whether it's for charging decisions, plea agreements, trials, or appeals. We have got to try to be as absolutely as fair as we can. And I do want increased transparency. So that's why I'm meeting with you today. We're going to try to, be as responsive as we can to media inquiries, to public inquiries. Matt Devanch is your first point of contact for questions you have about cases or what's going on. We'll try to be as transparent as we can because we know how important that is. Number two, we are going to implement a management audit of every case Kathy Kealoha touched. Tom Brady, the first deputy, is going to be in charge of that process. He is going to get assistance from senior folks like Chris Van Marter and whoever else we need to try to track down all of the cases to see whether she had a direct role, an indirect role, was the case assigned to her, or did she have any contact with it at all. Tom's 26 years in the federal system will assist him in this process. Now, number three, addressing the audit of the prosecutor's office. I want to thank the City Council for calling for the audit. I want to thank the auditor for performing it. There are a lot of good suggestions in there. Some of them are, Management 101. Others are more specific. We have already started to follow some of their suggestions. One of the things that we have already looked at is part of the conflict of interest policy. And we're trying, because we have a varied background here, folks in the U.S. Attorney's Office as well as the Attorney General's Office, we have come out with a conflict policy in action. And you've been given a copy of that. That's something they've been doing at the U.S. Attorney's Office for a long time. Anytime a case is open, the assigned prosecutor has to review it and affirmatively declare and put it in writing that he or she has no conflict, whether it's personal, financial, or otherwise, that no member of his or her family has a conflict in the case, and that it's an ongoing duty to disclose if it comes up. So that prosecutor then has to sign it, and so does his or her supervisor. Part of this really depends on self-reporting by the attorneys. That starts in traffic court. When they have a list of cases, maybe it's a high school classmate is on a stop sign case. Well, you got to ask another prosecutor to handle that. But it's got to be a mindset that if you have even the appearance of a conflict of interest, Kathy Kealoha never should have been doing anything about making the call on whether a police officer would get charged or not, given that her husband was chief of police. We want to make the culture here so people won't even think of doing something like that. And we want to make it front of mind for the attorneys as they open up every case. Next, we'll take a look at plea agreement processes, as the audit pointed out. The more you can standardize procedures, that would be helpful. Like I say, we have a number. This would be for felonies, and we'll look at misdemeanors, but as far as standardizing among the felonies, we'll see what we can do with that. Post-case evaluations, can that process be improved? We'll look at that. Handling of complaints was a big issue in the audit. We are going to come up with setting up policies, written policies and procedures, so if anyone sees something going on that's wrong, they know who they can report to. We'll work with the City Department of Human Resources to train the people, many of whom are in the administrative team, who are going to do the investigations, so they get training from the Human Resources Department so they know what they're doing and there's some consistency with their evaluation practices. We will, right now, in the midst of this COVID crisis, I want to take my hat off to the judiciary. They've been very aggressive about getting started with jury trials again. They started in December. They're ramping up. Several cases are being done a week for jury trials. That is going to be critical to help deal with the backlogs. There are huge backlogs in circuit court and district court, but getting jury trials going is going to help in a big way with that, because defendants are not going to want to enter into plea agreements or somehow dispose of their case unless there's a jury trial possibility at the other end. That gets everything moving. So I really want to take my hat off to Chief Justice Rechtenwald, to Chief Judge Browning, as well as Judges Wong and Ashford, because they've been very aggressive about this. You can go see across the street in district court, they're using the big arraignment courtrooms, the biggest courtrooms in the building, to do jury selection, and then the cases for trial go to the different trial courtrooms. So, but we have to try to work with them on bringing innovative solutions to this with the COVID crisis. It's heartening to see Vaccines started. Hopefully it'll come out as soon as possible. We need to get everybody vaccinated so we can go back to business as close to normal as possible. We're trying to look at career development for the deputy prosecutors. And that means coming up with a trial skills program. When I was head of district and family court, we took a short police, an assault case, turned it into a 7-part trial advocacy course so we could train the deputies in court about how to pick a jury, how to do opening statements, direct exam, cross-exam, and take them right through it. And we would do the training. They would be in court. They'd see their peers. They'd actually practice it. We need that kind of practical application. We'll look at office progression to see, after misdemeanors, where do people go next, and what's the most effective way to do that. I'm going to change, I've already started changing, the assignment of judge policy. The way the office had done it when I came in here was a few deputies would be assigned to each judge's chamber, so they'd handle everything that came up in that court. I talked about it with the team and the supervisors, and we were unanimously of the opinion that that does not encourage as much growth for the lawyers. They should have cases in all the different judges' courtrooms so they know how to react to different judges and different philosophies of things and different procedures. Part of being a good trial attorney is thinking on your feet and dealing with it. And so we're getting rid of that assignment to a particular courtroom, and the deputy prosecutors will be assigned to all of the courtrooms. And we're going to, as I have talked about, and what we'll talk to the deputies about is, and I know as a judge, and I know from being the toughest sentencing judge in circuit court, the truly violent and dangerous and the ones who won't stop stealing should go to prison at original sentencing. Not everybody should get put on probation. That said, that may be 40% of the defendants at sentencing. That means the majority can and should be placed on probation or getting a deferral. And we can use proven strategies like drug court, mental health court, hope probation. Right now, most probation systems aren't working well. If you don't have drug testing, you don't have face-to-face meetings. But as soon as the COVID crisis, they're doing the best they can right now. But what we're going to try to do is strategize on different ways to work with the deputies so we can convince the circuit court judges to send the really violent, dangerous, and the ones who won't stop stealing to prison. Now, that said, once they're in prison, I'm a big advocate for them getting treatment, and even more, just as importantly, is taking classes, educating themselves, bettering themselves. A number of inmates tell me they'd rather go to Saguaro prison in Arizona because that private prison would offer more classes. You know, there's something wrong with that. We want people, they should be, Department of Public Safety should be all about public safety. And public safety means making people better during their years in prison, which is an average of probably 3 or 4 years before coming back into society. So I support all efforts to rehabilitate folks in prison. But we got to strategize about different ways to try to convince the judges to send the ones that should go to prison. I've already started it, so is my first deputy. We are going to be meeting and working with all the law enforcement departments and agencies to coordinate efforts. I am a big believer in collaboration, cooperation. The crooks work together when it serves their purposes. We should be doing exactly the same thing. When I was the United States Attorney, I made the federal agencies working with HPD my #1 priority. And the very best cases we made were when we had the combined efforts of the feds and HPD. That's where we came out the best. And when people start trusting our office, they will start calling us for tips, suggestions, criminality they know of, because they know we'll take it seriously and we'll deal with it. But we're open for business for cooperating with all of the other law enforcement agencies. That includes certainly first and foremost HPD, but also the Attorney General's office, the United States Attorney's office, the Liquor Commission, Homeland Security, whoever we can do. Reorganize within the office and reemphasize that certain types of crimes we've got to really tackle aggressively. And that includes child sex trafficking, that includes domestic violence, that includes white-collar crime. We're looking at what we have to do, even in this challenging COVID restrictive budgetary crisis we're in. We have got to be creative. We have got to try to do what we can to address certain kinds of crimes. We will be aggressive with a lot of different areas, but we gotta put on our thoughts to how to be innovative and deal with it. Number 9, engaging the community to solve problems. So that means listening to the community, meeting with different community groups. It may mean starting initiatives like Weed and Seed again. It's figuring out what is the best way, because you've got to talk to the community to find out what the problem in that community is. I live in Kaimuki. I don't know firsthand what the problems are. I can look at crime stats, but to know firsthand, you've got to talk to members of the community. And I learned you've got to listen to people. That's how you learn things, and you learn about community. We will be doing that. And finally, I've always been a big proponent that policy decisions in the criminal justice area, as much as possible, should be based on evidence-based principles. That means data and research should drive your decision-making. That is a rare concept in criminal justice. It's often based on gut feelings or anecdote, or we've always done it this way. And I've never accepted that, whether I was here to begin with, whether I was the United States Attorney, or whether I was a circuit court judge. You've got to be innovative. You've got to try new things, because if you don't, you're going to keep getting the same results. So these are the areas we're going to focus on for the first 100 days, and I've already been asking the deputy prosecutors and the staff to come up with ideas to make the office run better, and to make our office more effective. So at this point, I'll be happy to take a few questions, but I'm really happy to be here. I think we've got a great team. With Tom Brady by my side, we are going to hopefully lead this office into making it the absolute best place it has ever been. Thank you.
Mr. Alm,
Yes.
Christina Jadro with Civil B. Thanks for having us. I have
You
a
bet.
couple of questions about the audit that weren't on your list already. One of the findings was that over the past 5 years, the total number of cases this office accepted was way up, like 75%. Do you know why the workload increased so much, and what are you planning to do about it?
We are looking at that because just intuitively, that doesn't make sense to me. That you'd have that kind of increase. So we will answer that question. We are trying to find that out. And part of it is, when that information is gotten from whatever system, people have to be entering the information into the system correctly. And that sounds like more of a felony issue. The numbers did go up, but if it was the misdemeanor area, it would have gone up by, there are hundreds of thousands of cases in the misdemeanor system. So I don't think it's there. I don't think that's accurate. I think it's one of these garbage in, garbage out kinds of things from the data. But I had the same response when I looked at it, that it just didn't make sense. Because if anything, normally this office takes in like 2,000 felonies, new felonies every year. This past year, because of COVID and other stuff, it's like 1,000. So that, it just doesn't make sense. But we're new to the office. We're digging into it. We're looking at the case management systems. We're looking at everything. And that's one of the questions we want to answer, how those numbers. I'm not blaming the auditors. I'm just saying they may have been given certain information, and the way it was obtained may have been in error. But we're going to try to answer that question.
Another interesting tidbit from the audit was that staff vacancies increased 17% from 2015 to 2019. Are you looking at that, and what are you planning to do?
Well, I can tell you from being a judge, and this office has not been the prime place people want to work. And we are going to make it the opposite. And that means Richardson graduates, that means law clerks. This is the place they should want to come to if you want to learn how to be a trial attorney. because both the roles of the prosecutor and defense counsel are very important. The system needs both of them. That's how you get to truth. But when it comes to presenting cases in court, the prosecutor is doing most of the work. We have the burden of production as well as the burden of persuasion. That means calling the witnesses. That means charging the cases. That means, presenting the case and trying to prove to the jury beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the crime. So this is the place to learn the system. And then if you want to go to private practice after that, you want to be a defense attorney, that's fine. But I look forward to talking to Richardson students. We are in the process of hiring right now because I'm getting a lot of resumes for all sorts of jobs here about people who want to come work here now that a new team is here.
I have a couple more. That's okay. The audit also found that the office's supervisors aren't providing enough oversight for their staff, I think in part because of the workload. Your thoughts on that?
We've talked about that. This is going to be a challenge, but the supervisors have to be in court watching the deputy prosecutors, giving them feedback. That's nothing to be afraid of. It is hard, but I've got great division chiefs, same thing with team captains, and my expectations are they will be in court doing that. When I was head of district and family court here before, and Keith Ganashiro asked me to do that because there were problems in the division. I was the felony team captain. Kevin Takata was on my team. Ron Johnson, now Judge Johnson, was on my team. But Keith asked me to head up that division. I said, I will do it if I can bring supervisors with me. He said, okay. So Tom Brady agreed to come up here. Loretta Sheehan agreed to be a supervisor, and Ron Johnson. And so we really turned it into a trials division where people wanted to go to trial. We set up that training I talked about Saturday morning in their suits in district court after being in court all week. Mitch Roth stopped me at the, and I knock on wood, he's feeling better. He stopped me at the legislature maybe 2 years ago saying, Steve, those Saturday sessions taught us so much about the rules of evidence and the way to make it work. You've got to do in-court practice in doing those skills. You don't learn them in law school. How to pick a jury, how to do opening statements, how to do direct exam. And then part of what they did as the branch chiefs is they went into court and observed the deputies. We came up with evaluation forms, where people are strong and weak. That was part of the evaluation process, and deputies have to get, they'll get used to that. That's part of the routine. But the team captains and the supervisors are there to help them be the best trial attorneys they can be. And in evaluating the office and in moving all these positions around to take the places of the vacant positions, I'm so pleased, and Tom and I have talked about this, the quality of a number of the deputies in this office is outstanding. They just need the right leadership and encouragement so they won't leave the office, they will want to stay there. And that's what we're trying to do. That's one of the ways to make the office as strong as it can be, is to get the best attorneys and have them stay here to develop experience and get training so they can be successful.
The audit also mentioned that the position of prosecuting attorney is, of course, elected and is not subject to any oversight from the mayor, city council, or commission. And they noted that Honolulu could establish a commission sort of similar to the police commission. I wondered what you thought of that idea.
How about giving us a chance first? We are really busy learning about the office again, making sure things work. I think it's one of those situations that you don't want to change everything because you've had a problem recently. And I'd certainly work with the commission if that's what they thought, ought to be done. But give us a chance. We'll be talking about what we're doing. I welcomed that audit. It gave us some insight into areas that needed to be worked on. Like I say, we've already instituted some stuff, but we're looking at a lot of others, like writing out procedures for complaints and other things. And I think if they feel the office is being well run and is receptive and is more transparent, I think the need for that, may not be as pressing right now.
How has the transition been since, taking office as police?
It's been great. It's been tiring. There's been a lot to do, a lot of people to meet with. I've set up separate meetings with all of the divisions. I've met with most of them, not all of them yet, because you have to meet with both the attorneys and the staff separately in this room, but to be socially distanced. And that's where I really had a chance to talk to them. There's some staff members who are still here from when I was here before. I think it's been interesting. Because I had that background here, and so did Tom, we knew what this office did. And the work of the Honolulu prosecutors is absolutely critical to public safety in Hawaii. 90% of the criminal cases are handled in state court, including most of the violent criminals. So, the U.S. Attorney has a very important role to play. They often can take complex issues. They can take years to investigate the case, like the Miski case, for example. But when it comes to keeping the streets safe, people committing violent crime, getting arrested by HPD, we've got to step up and be there. And that's why the work here is so important. And it's important that the deputy prosecutors know we value them. We put some great supervisors in the initial division, the misdemeanor district court division. And that has a special place in my heart because I did that for 4 years. Because you've got to get deputies starting out the right way, have good attitudes about it. Don't leave the division, leave the office for whatever reason. They should want to stay there so they can learn it, go on and do felony jury trials, maybe get up to a murder case. But this should be a place they want to work at, and we're getting it back to that. So, but it's learning about it, it's working, and I really think it's important that we're reaching out and talking to the division chiefs to get their input. Because that's part of it. They know the office well. I'll still make the final decision on things, but you want to get the people in the office to give you their best assessment of the people and of the procedures, because they know stuff. I learned from being a judge, starting Hope Probation, getting suggestions from my judicial assistant. And I'll give you an example. All of these motions to modify in Hope were supported by an affidavit. That requires a notary every single time. And because Hope holds people accountable, unlike regular probation, there are several motions every single day. Well, several years into Hope, the head clerical person, Annabelle, came up to me and said, Judge Alm, instead of doing affidavits, could we do declarations? And then there's no notary. And after I was done kicking myself for not thinking of this 6 years earlier, we switched over to declarations all the time. But that simple idea probably saved half an hour of work every single day for the notary. Sometimes we're too close to it to figure out. So I really look at both the staff and the deputies in this office to come up with ideas for improving it, and we'll weigh them and we'll talk about them. Nothing will get rejected out of hand because nobody ever gets anything accomplished by themselves. It's always working with other people. My brother taught me that. It's absolutely true. And people like Miley Kanemaru and Weed and Seed taught me as a type A personality to listen to other people, because you never learn anything when you're talking, you learn it when you're listening. And so just like working with the community, we find out what the community's problems are by listening to them.
One more question.
Yeah.
You mentioned bringing in some new folks and using talent already in the office, but how many people did you let go and who?
Well, there were a couple that retired before, and there may have been a couple who left before they were asked to leave. I believe the number was 8 that I did not reappoint for a variety of reasons. But that meant more than 90, the vast majority, we kept on. Because part of it, we were looking at, did they have anything to do with Kathy Kealoha's situation? And none of the people I kept on were in the inner circle of decision making here. So, to me, it's a really good and reassuring piece of information that the vast majority of deputies, I am confident, had nothing to do with any of the impropriety, any of the illegality that may have gone on here. If I ever find anything about it, we will take swift, effective action. I don't expect to. Just like, when I talk about bullying or anything else, I have zero tolerance for that. I'll take action immediately if any of that comes up.
Related to that, is Keith Kaneshiro's former special assistant Roger Lau still employed by the
No.
office? Did you let him go, or he retired?
His contract ran out.
Okay, and Dwight not a motorist, is he still here?
No.
And then lastly, I have a data question. This office doesn't really put out any kind of annual report or any data on a regular basis, to my knowledge. So what, if any, metrics do you plan to publish on a regular basis?
Partly, we're going to see what we can get out of our case management system. We're looking very carefully at that. We would like to get more data out there. Like I said, I'm a big believer in data and research to drive criminal justice policy, not anecdote. So I want to know how we're doing. How are we doing on jury trials? You know, how many are we winning? How many are we losing? Because when I talk about Berger versus United States, it means do the right thing. But as I tell the deputies, at the same time, if you've charged the case correctly and you work hard and are prepared, you should win most of the cases too. I mean, it is a competitive enterprise of ferreting out crime, as the Supreme Court Justice said. So that is part of our business. We want to be fair, but we also want to win at trial or negotiate plea agreements from a position of strength. So we will look at that, and we will certainly try to put out as much as we can as far as that kind of information.
And will that include like race and ethnicity data as well?
That I don't, we have to look at, because some of that is not included right away, and it's available from other sources now, whether it's the judiciary or something else. I don't want to task people here to be collecting stuff and spending a whole lot of time, but again, you talk about that when we were doing Hope probation, they got revoked and were sent to prison 50% less often than people on regular probation. So we asked the researchers, how did Native Hawaiians do? And the great answer is a rising tide helps all ships. Native Hawaiians who were in Hope got their probation revoked and were sent to prison 35% less often than if they were in probation as usual. And given that the Hope judge, like I had more than 2,000 felony probationers that I supervised at a time, that means hundreds of Native Hawaiians did not go to prison because they succeeded on probation in Hope. And I can't think of a single thing that would send a family into poverty faster than mom or dad going to prison. That's why Dan Foley, who's one of my supporters, former head of the legal department at the ACLU, as well as a variety of other things, including being an intermediate court of appeals judge, says, ironically, you may have been the toughest senator in the courthouse, but you were probably the most progressive candidate who ran because you actually have gotten things done. When I chaired the Penal Code Review Committee, we got rid of mandatory minimums for possession of a small amount of drugs. Treatment works more effectively in the community than in prison. So hundreds of people have been the judge has discretion now. If they're violent or dangerous, they can send them to prison. But otherwise, they can put them on probation, even if they get convicted again for promoting dangerous drugs in the third degree, or again for that, because treatment is more effective in the community. So if somebody's a drug addict, but they're not dangerous, they have drug problems, put them on probation and let them do their treatment in the community. And then programs like Drug Court and Hope can help them succeed. So I've seen the value of that, and I've seen how we've been able to help Native Hawaiians help themselves by being in Hope rather than in probation as usual. Yeah.
Quite recently, there's been like a lot of home invasion robberies, especially targeting the elderly. What is the office going to try to do to help?
Well, that is a real challenge because, again, you speak to data and research. The good news is, in the last year, crime is down on Oahu. And, I would talk about that during the campaign. And other opponents who try to talk about it being crime is up, that is not true. The Attorney General's has a website that HPD provides the information from, and say, like August of 2019, there were 4,600 cases reported to HPD, violent crime, property crime, and other special crime. In June of 2020, it was down to 3,000. That's like a 30% reduction in crime. And I think it makes sense because of COVID, businesses are closed, you don't have as many shopliftings. But, and I think burglaries were probably down. Unfortunately, when there are a number of burglaries, speaking to what you're saying, people are at home. So you end up with these home invasions that, if they weren't home, might not happen. And all I can do is tell you, we will support HPD in their efforts to investigate the crime. I would urge, and we've had several in my neighborhood where I live. And this is people climbing through an open window at night, 12 o'clock at night when everybody's asleep. So I would urge the public, lock all of your windows, because that's how these guys are coming in. And HPD is trying to arrest them. If they get arrested, we will prosecute them. And to me, they fit into the definition of people that are dangerous. If they're going into these houses when people are there, it scares the heck out of people. They shouldn't have to put up with that. So somebody doing that kind of thing should go to prison. But it's a hard thing to wave a magic wand and deal with it. We will be aggressive in prosecuting. We will try to get the judges. And again, you're talking about the creator with Cheryl Noy of Hope Probation, where most people can be supervised on probation. But if they're choosing to victimize others this way, then I think they're giving up their right to live among us for a few years, and they should go to prison. So we will work with HPD. We'll see if we can come up with any strategies. But honestly, a big part of this is neighbors watching out for other neighbors. It's reporting suspicious people and vehicles in the neighborhood, and it's making sure their house is as tightly set at night so that the windows are locked and people can't sneak in, because they're coming in through the windows. That has been our experience. That's what we're hearing from the police department.
And that's the one thing, but we also, although you say crime is down, it does seem, not too long ago, that it seems to be a little bit more brazen and desperate, these criminals now.
Right. Well, but it's one of those things, we cannot rely on anecdote, and now that said, your neighborhood crime may be spiking. And if you're the victim of a crime, you don't care about any of these stats, right? When you're the victim of a crime, that's all that matters. You don't want to be victimized. You're victimized, you're mad, and it shouldn't happen. But we have to know that, and HPD will be looking at that to see which neighborhoods maybe have a spike in crime. Maybe they can reallocate resources there. The more neighborhood watches are great, because criminals don't want to get caught. They're going to go in places where people aren't, or people don't care about it. Every community on this island is made up mostly of honest people. Hardworking people trying to make ends meet. There are always some bad guys that make different neighborhoods look bad. But crime is down. Again, it doesn't, your neighborhood may be higher. But I think the perception is maybe people are home, maybe they're watching the news more, and so they're seeing crime take place. But that's why one of the areas I do want to do is work with communities, whether it's programs like Weed and Seed or other, because when we did Weed and Seed in Chinatown and Kalihi-Palama before, it reduced crime there by 70%. Burglaries, assaults, rapes, disorderly conduct, it all was reduced by 70%. We're talking 3,000 felonies down to 750, or 7,600 misdemeanors, down to 2,400. When a community gets organized and law enforcement's working together, really good things can happen. So I agree with you. Perception is important, and people may be looking at their phones. They may be getting alerts about burglaries or other things in their neighborhood, which happened before. They just didn't know about it, so they're more looking at it. Stolen stuff away is a lot of unhappy people because their stuff gets stolen, so they're trying to advertise, and maybe they can get some help from it to catch the person responsible. And that's why when I talk about violent and dangerous, but I also talk about some people that won't stop stealing. And if you've lost some precious stuff at home, keepsakes, it doesn't matter how much it cost. It matters that it mattered to you. And there's some people that go in, it's not just breaking in to drink soda or beer or whatever and have fun. It's to steal the stuff that's there. And the people that want to continue doing that, they should be in prison as well and then get rehabilitated. But I'm a big believer in actions having consequences, both good or bad. That's why Hope Probation was so successful. That's why Drug Court was successful. You give people expectations, you encourage them to succeed. But if they're violating the law, they're violating the rules, there has to be a consequence, or you're going to get more rule breaking.
Last one from me.
Sure.
Do you have any concerns about HPD's clearance rate, which is lower than the national average?
You know, we're going to have to sit down and talk to them about that and look at that. I read that report. It's lower than it was in the 90s. And I'm sure that that's got to be bothering the police at the same time. There may be some factors we're not thinking about. One of the challenges has always been that for purposes of statistics, crimes against tourists are counted. But the number of tourists are not counted as far as our population total. So, but that said, we've always been traditionally in the bottom 10 states for violent crime, but in the top 5 for property crime. And tourists get a lot of that attention. And those cases are extremely hard to solve, and often tourists don't want to come back and the like. So, you know, when a tourist gets ripped off, depending on what it is, you know, they come to Hawaii and they're in paradise, they let their guard down, like we let our guards down when we go visit other places. Well, if they leave their camera on the beach, it's going to get stolen. The police will have no leads as far as what to do. So I don't know if our increased number of tourists has led those numbers to go up, but we've been meaning to meet with HPD again, and when we do meet with them and talk to them, that's one of the things we will talk about and see, are there things we can do working together to try to solve that? You know, so if somebody becomes a serial car thief, if we can figure out a way to stop them after the first one and not give them a chance to keep violating the law before we bring multiple charges against them down the road. But we got to be creative, but we got to learn more about what HPD thinks and other people, criminologists, think has led to that increase in the, or decrease in the clearance rate. Because I did read that article, and I was disturbed, as I'm sure that the police leadership was disturbed. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you very much. And I guess we'll see you in 100 days and see how we do. Okay, thank you very much.